Who are you under the jersey? Who are you under the suit? If you don't know that, then every win and loss you have either says I'm a winner or I'm a loser.
Today, we're welcomed by someone a little bit different to our traditional guest, Dr. Amber Selking. She is the mental performance coach at LSU football, formerly at Notre Dame during their winningest 5 years in history. Beyond sports, she's worked with athletes, executives, and organizations at the very top of their game. In this episode, we dive deep into the science of performance, how thoughts, emotions, and psychology drive outcomes.
Humans have about 70 to 80,000 thoughts a day. And those thoughts are either sending good, positive, aligned thoughts and signals with what we want to happen in the world around us, who we want to be in the world around us, or contrary to that.
Why mindset isn't motivational fluff, but a neurological process you can train like a muscle.
Thoughts are like really, really important because thoughts are like bicep curls for your brain. And what happens when we work out, guys?
Well,
You get full. You're like, I don't know, I haven't done that in a while.
Practical tools for salespeople, founders, and leaders, from self-talk and breathwork to structuring seasons of work consistency.
What game are you playing? You have to expect to get tackled. You have to expect to have disagreement, to have failure. And it's not that you enjoy it, but you take an ice bath, you watch some film, and you come back the next day and you go again because you love it.
And how to refine setbacks as part of the game and build teams that thrive under pressure. This is her playbook.
this episode is sponsored by PGAI and Seller. Go and discover how these solutions can help amplify your sales execution. Check out the descriptions below. Welcome to Hunters and Unicorns. I'm Simon Koutis and I'm joined by my co-host Ollie Kune.
Welcome back to the show, everyone.
And it's with great pleasure that we introduce Dr. Amber Selking. Dr. Amber, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, guys. Really excited to join you today and just talk all things high performance.
Amazing.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Well, that's exactly where we're going to go to today because you have got an unbelievable reputation. I know you've got a following of your own. You obviously work with some of the most high-performing athletes, executives. You are currently mental performance coach over at LSU, having previously been over at Notre Dame. And you're also the chief culture officer at Lippert. So you're balancing so much, and we're really excited to kind of dive in because with all respect, I think, high performance coach can be quite a fluffy thing in many ways, but you do it in such a different and a unique way. So just tell us a little bit about some of the impact that you look to bring to the people that you work with.
Yeah, I've sat in a million keynote speeches like you guys have, listened to a bunch of different podcasts. And at the end of it, a lot of times I leave like motivated, but then I'm like, what did we just talk about? Or like, that sounded good, but there's like no substantiation to that. And so sometimes, when I'm doing keynotes for organizations or I tell people what I do, they're like, oh, so you're like a motivational speaker. And I'm like, no, stab me in the neck. I help people deliver their best when their best is needed. And like, I have a lot of energy, so it happens to be motivating, but I teach science, right? And so, it's been really important to me in my career. Two things really is one, to understand the science of human and organizational high performance so that we can teach that to people. Because I believe that when people know the depths of what's happening inside of them and how organizational structure drives human high performance, it gives you more courage and confidence to actually do the things that some motivational people say, but without much substantiation. And then the other thing that's really important to me is that, that I actually get to do this work. It's not that I write books about it and stand on stages and talk about it. I do both of those things. But I'm in the arena every day, in college football, in global publicly traded company, trying to do this stuff. And so it's not always pretty. It's not always perfect. There's a lot of nuance to it. But to me, what I do with high performers and high performing organizations is bring the substance behind what intuitively we might know to be true, which then brings the courage, the confidence, and the conviction that it takes to go out and be great as an individual and as an organization.
Yeah. Well, I didn't mention the fact that you do actually have a PhD in applied sports psychology, right? So there is science. It's not just nice motivational things. You really do understand the scientific proof behind what you're doing, and that really kind of substantiates a lot of your work, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I remember being in college, I was a soccer player at Notre Dame, and, you know, they taught us about visualization. And every time I closed my eyes to visualize, I fell asleep because, you know, when you're a high performer, you don't really have time to just sit around and think about things, right? And then all of a sudden I go to grad school and I learned that the brain doesn't know the difference between what's real and what's imagined. And actually doing mental reps sends the exact same signal in the exact same frequency and sequence when you imagine it as when you physically do it. So mental rehearsal actually builds talent at the neurological level by myelinating these neural pathways. And I can guarantee you that as an athlete, like if I knew that, I could have stayed awake for 15 minutes to do mental rehearsal every day. And so it's important to me, again, that we really understand why are we doing things that we do every day and what impact are they having, so that we can be more intentional about it.
So with that said, what are some of the kind of the fundamentals around this, you know, what you preach? Help us understand a little bit around that.
I always start with some basic fundamental elements of like brain science 101, if you will. And there's really two components to that. The first of it is that thoughts are real things. I think that people think that thoughts are these ephemeral things that float around in our brain and don't matter. But what we know is that thoughts are actually electrical signals that get sent from our brain through our neurons and into our bodies. And humans have about 70 to 80,000 thoughts a day. And those thoughts are either sending good, positive, aligned thoughts and signals with what we want to happen in the world around us, who we want to be in the world around us, or contrary to that. And then our thoughts, this is like one of the most important processes. We actually start every mental performance training session with this, with my players in our team room. So we all say it out loud together. The boys say it in unison. And so we say that our thoughts affect our emotions. Our emotions affect our physiological response. And physio just means your body, right? So things like your heart rate, your muscle tension, your visual field actually expands and constricts on this process. Our hormones change on this process. And ultimately, how our bodies are going to determine our performance in the moment. So thoughts, emotions, physiological response, performance. And then I say, what starts the process? And they all say thoughts. And I say, who controls your thoughts? And they say, we do. And that's the key takeaway, right? Is that you get to choose and control your thoughts. And your thoughts will affect your emotions, and your emotions will affect your body, and your body will determine how you show up in the moment. And so with so many things that are outside of our control, fundamentally, the number one thing that drives our success as human beings is in our control, because it's how we choose to think moment by moment. And so that is like the first key element that we try to help everybody understand. And then the second part of that is thoughts are really important because they start that process, but thoughts are like really, really important because thoughts are like bicep curls for your brain. And what happens when we work out, guys? You lift weights, what happens?
Well,
It's cool.
Not you, Simon.
Cool. You're like, I don't know, I haven't done that in a while. Me either. So, you know, you lift weights and your muscles get bigger. Well, we repeat certain thoughts and our brain actually forms mindsets. And so you want to talk about buzzwords in the world right on social media right now. Mindsets is certainly it. But a mindset is an actual protein pattern that gets wired into your brain and changes the form and function of how your brain operates. And so we know that, again, repeated thoughts build mindsets. And at Selking Performance Group, we help people build championship mindsets. And I use the analogy that a mindset is like an Instagram filter on your brain, right? Mm-hmm. You could have one picture, and if you put a black and white filter over that, it looks totally different than if you put a lo-fi filter over it. So pressure is a really great example of this. I often ask people, you know, hey, raise your hand if you've over the course of your life have said, oh, I don't handle pressure well, or I don't do well under pressure, or I wasn't good at test taking because it's too much, it's pressure, right? And you'll have a lot of people raise their hand. Well, every time they have that thought, they build that mindset. Now, all of a sudden, they step into a pressure moment, that Instagram filter gets slapped over their brain, and it's a black and white experience for them versus somebody that had a really good early on pressure experience and started thinking, damn, I'm pretty good at pressure. I like pressure. Pressure's where I get great, right? Now all of a sudden they step into that moment, lo-fi filter gets slapped on and they're kind of like, let's go, baby. It's game time, you know? And so that's how mindsets work. And from there, when we understand the power of our thoughts and how thoughts build mindsets, that becomes foundational then to helping people understand, all right, well, where am I? Where do I want to go? And how am I going to get there?
It's really interesting. I think, and I just want to make sure as somebody, listening to this, they really understand what that is. Because if you take a football as an example, right? American football, this is the one where you use your hands, not your feet. Obviously there's lots of things that somebody needs to be thinking about that, whether it's, they're tackling, whether it's winning, winning the game, whether it's, making the right passes, making the right plays. How do you start to, break those thought processes down? Because again, instantly I'm thinking and putting myself in the situation where I need to think about this, I need to think about this. But how do I manifest that, and how do I actually go through a structured way of being able to go and break down what are the thought process and how do I work out what I need to be prepared for and what order it needs to be prepared?
Yeah, there's a lot to it, right? And so it was interesting when I first started doing applied sports psychology work. I was working with one-on-one clients. I was in grad school, and so you sit down in a room with somebody, and you're like, why are you here? Like, what are you trying to get better at? And then, they're like, well, I want to work on my confidence. And so you're about 3 sessions in of working on confidence when you realize, like, man, you don't really have a confidence problem. You have an emotional control problem. And because you don't really know how to manage your emotions, you're not confident at the moment of execution. Or they're like, I want to work on my focus, right? And then about 3 sessions in, it kind of takes that long to figure out what's happening. You realize, like, man, you don't have a focus problem. You have an awareness problem. And because you're so unaware of what's happening inside of you and outside of you, you're distracted by all of that. And so therefore you can't focus. And so that early work of mine really forced me to step back and think about, well, what goes into a solid mental game? Because this is the other problem. We don't have a language to communicate on mental performance, really. And so that's when I first built my mental performance playbook. And so it is 8 foundational plays teaching you how your brain works, how it impacts how you show up, and then gives you specific tools and strategies to train that aspect. And then at the end of it, you sort of have this foundational mental playbook that you can pull from and use to orient around all of the stuff that we deal with as performers on a day-to-day basis. And so I turned that into a book in 2022 because, again, I think we should be teaching positive psychology, sports psychology to kindergartners. Like, if we could teach our world how their brain works and how to use it from a very young age, I think we would be able to avoid so much individual and collective struggle, And I believe in the purpose of struggle, but like unnecessary, self-inflicted pain, right? And so, and so at LSU football and at Notre Dame before, we actually take all of our players and staff through our foundational mental playbook. And it's like 8 hours of foundational mindset training. And so at the end of that, 1, we have a common language to understand and to communicate what's happening from a mental performance perspective. And then 2, they have an arsenal of weapons to pull from to use given the situation in front of them. And so then when we're in high pressure games or moments or, a 3-game skid in the late in your season, like, we have something to pull from collectively to reorient, align, and continue moving forward. So that's usually where we start.
So just bringing this back to, our audience is very much, sales professionals, high pressure, lots of rejection. It's founders, it's VCs, it's different to being in a football match where you kind of brush yourself down and bounce back up and get straight into it. What are some of the principles that you teach, and how could they be applied in that setting?
Yeah, it's a great question. Coach Kelly often says when you win a game that you should win, but it was closer than everybody thought it should have been, right? He always says, he's like, Winning's hard, guys. The media likes to think this should all be easy, but winning's hard. And that's the reality in every aspect of life, whether it's your marriage, whether it's raising your kids, whether it's being a founder or a salesperson, winning's hard. And so mental performance isn't about the sunshine and roses of thinking everything's wonderful, but rather trying to drive the consistency that it takes to deliver your best when your best is needed. And the beauty of sports, like you just said, is that there is immediate feedback, right? At the end of the game, you got a scoreboard, and then you get to go back to work and you get to go again. And so it's this constant cycle of like work and feedback, work and feedback. A lot of times in life and work, it's less glamorous, right? And that work and feedback loop is either really, it's a lot longer, our cycle times are a lot longer, or they're so fast, like in sales, you don't even know if you're winning or losing half day. It just feels like you're getting your face kicked in. And so those are the moments that mental performance and some of the strategies that we talk about can come into play. And so, there's a million things that we can do. I'll share a couple high level ones. The first is understanding like your identity and who you are at your very core. Like, who are you under the jersey? Who are you under the suit, right? Because if you don't know that, then every win and loss you have either says I'm a winner or I'm a loser. And that is a very emotionally volatile place for performers to live. So when you have clarity on your identity and believe in that person, the wins and the losses then are feedback, not identity triggers. And I think that is a really, really important aspect to high performance in sport or in life in general. So that identity piece is a core element for us. From a mental performance standpoint and from like a winning and loss standpoint, seasons get long. And again, in business, your season cycles can be really long. And so we talk a lot about like shrinking the game, because when the brain sees a full year or a full 5-year funding cycle or, whatever that might be, it one of two things, gets really anxious or it starts to shut down. And so when we try to shrink the game and create almost mini seasons that we go through and we name those seasons, we have clear goals within those seasons so that we can celebrate or make adjustments. So it makes you feel like you're more engaged in the process versus just like running a marathon, And so identity, and then really understanding and sculpting the season of life or work that you're in and naming it and setting some objectives within it. And then, finally, the day-to-day of really understanding some just mental skills, whether that's your self-talk or your breathing, or even, just having the right mentors and network in place to help you think right on a day-to-day basis are 3 really specific things that I've found incredibly helpful in my own career, outside of sport, but also, again, that we can apply in any setting.
This episode is sponsored by Seller. Seller provides a white glove treatment to every complex deal with their bespoke system, whilst ensuring you get the most value from your CRM for everyday selling. What is self-talk?
Oh, I was just about to ask the same question.
That's when I usually ask my audience this, and they look at me and they're like, I'm like, this is not a trick question. It kind of is what it says it is, right? It's the words that we say to ourselves. It's the thoughts that we are thinking in our own head. And we call it self-talk for a reason, because we have to proactively engage in that talk. What most people actually do is self-listen. The thoughts in their heads, the voice chirping there, they listen to that voice. And then they let those thoughts create emotions. They let those emotions create a physiological state of stress or anxiety or fear or shame or insecurity, right? And then their performance suffers because of it. And just to clarify, when I talk about performance, I mean 2 things. Performance to me is how you show up in the moment, like who you are in a moment, and accomplishing what you're there to accomplish in the moment, right? Because I don't know if you guys are like me, but I've had times where I've accomplished what I've wanted to accomplish in the moment, but I've not been who I wanted to be, like the person I wanted to be in that moment. And so to me, like true high performance is both of those things. And so when we flip that script from self-listen to self-talk, it becomes proactive communication to ourselves that is generating right emotional states, that generate right physiological states, that put us in the best position to deliver our best when our best is needed. And so, I think you start this by what's the first thoughts that you have when you wake up in the morning? A lot of people just, what's today going to be like? I'm so tired. I feel that we've got to take hold of those first thoughts captive in the morning and talk to ourselves like, man, today's going to be a good day. It's slam packed, but I'm like X, Y, and Z. Right. And so just that can start catalyzing your day in a different state.
Do you prepare for that? Do you actually, is it something that you document? Do you kind of write things down and then mentally rehearse those things? And how often should you be doing these things?
That's a great question. Absolutely. Right. We, in our athletes, we actually have them create what we call power statements. So there's general self-talk, right? As you go throughout the course of the day, the thoughts that you have, are you listening to yourself or are you talking to yourself, and managing that like you would a coach would a player. You as a human from a mental performance standpoint, you are both player and coach, right? And so you have to coach yourself, the player, with the right language that person, aka you, should be thinking throughout the course of the day. But then there's like specific moments, right, that we have that we know we need to be on point or a certain state doing a certain thing. And so that's where we have our guys create power statements, right? And a lot of them will tape their wrists and write them on their wrist, because in the middle of high performance, it's fourth and short and we're going for it. They're not thinking, what should I be thinking to myself right now? So having it right there on their wrist, the last thing they see when they put their hand down as that mental trigger is really helpful. And I'll give you some examples. So some of our guys will just simply write breathe on their wrist, which is the second cue I wrote. But what we know is that 60 to 90 seconds of deep breath can actually reset your central nervous system, which helps your muscles fire better, which helps your brain process faster and more clearly. And so just seeing that is a reminder, hey, between this snap, I got to reset my breath. Between these phone calls, a lot of times in business, we're from one Zoom call to the next Zoom call, and you're on to the next meeting before you've even processed the last one. And by your fourth meeting, you're carrying 3 meetings of baggage in your brain and your body state that is going to inhibit your performance. And so just that visual cue reminder to breathe. I've had one of my guys, he wrote, this is one of my favorites. He wrote on his wrist, I'm a child of the king, because his faith was really important to him. And he said, Doc, for me, I'm out there and I'm playing in front of 1 million people. And I look down and I'm reminded hey, man, it's bigger than football. You're going to be okay. You're a child of the king. But then he looks at me and he smiles. He's like, but I'm also pretty good. So when I'm out there balling, I look down, I'm reminded, hey, baby, you a child of the king, you ain't the king. And so it's this dynamic of keeping him humble, but also really grounded and hungry. And then, I've had leaders do the same thing. I've got sticky notes all over my computer screen that have phrases and words and reminders of who I'm trying to be every call, every interaction, every meeting, every time I sit down to work on a PowerPoint presentation. What am I bringing to that moment? And so those visual cues and reminders are really helpful to keep your brain in that right state. I actually had one of my coaches, she was a college women's basketball coach. She actually redid her entire office in the right colors that generated the right states for her. She had things from former players. She's like, I used to have random stuff from Target. You buy just a random little sign and put it in there. She's like, no, everything in my office today has extreme meaning. And every time I look at it, it's a reminder of why I do what I do, of who I am, of what I'm trying to accomplish. And so that helps her maintain the self-talk that's necessary as an elite performer. And then to your question about duration, it's a daily thing, right? We all wish we could walk into the gym on January 1st and walk out fit for the rest of the year, but that doesn't happen. And the same is true with the brain. We have to train our brain like we train our body, like we train our craft. And when we get that intentional and consistent and aggressive about it even, man, you can find some pretty cool layers of yourself and the people around you.
How long would you say, by applying this,
How quickly will you, how quickly, I always use the word quickly, but it's not, as you say, sometimes these things take time, right? But what sort of timeframes, can you give to, by doing this consistently, do you think you would start to see an impact?
Relatively quickly. I mean, at the end of the day, this is how humans have been created to operate. And so it's like when you tap into your operating system, it's like, when you get your computer and you're on the wrong Wi-Fi network, it's like choppy and it's like it was when we first got on. And then I got on the right Wi-Fi network. And what happens? Signal starts flying, we start flowing, it starts working better. And the same is true with the brain. So, I mean, you can say on average, right, you rebuild a habit in 30 days. Mindsets are kind of the same, depending on how long you've built it up, if there's any trauma associated with it. I will say that, medication inhibits that process. So if you're on a lot of medications for whatever it might be. We see a lot of people obviously today on anxiety, depression meds, and those are going to be inhibitors to your ability to really experience the impact of some of this. But it can be a catalyst to help you navigate through it and hopefully mitigate off of some of those drugs and then get to actually being able to rewiring your brain. But at the end of the day, I mean, I use this example too. Like when I first started working with Coach Kelly, at Notre Dame, I came in after a 4-8 season, and we rehauled the whole organizational structure of the program, and then taught. So my philosophy of organizational high performance is it's got to be top down, bottom up, and contextually relevant. So top down, what are the leadership organizational principles that need to be in place in a system that are aligned with human high performance, and then teaching the individuals inside of the system how to think right. And then make it contextually relevant, right? Football is a little bit different than manufacturing. It's a little bit different than a technology or sales space. But you tweak kind of the language and the rhythms of it. And so that same team that went 4-8 went 10-2 the next year and proceeded to go on to be win 10 plus games in the next 5 years, had 2 undefeated 12-0 regular season teams during that time. And so that's a pretty quick turnaround. And, it takes great leadership, it takes great consistency, and it takes great buy-in. But when you have those things, it's exciting what can happen for a human and for an organization.
Thanks to our sponsor, Pipeline Generation AI, the platform that researches your top accounts, creates insights and assets to help you engage more effectively. Elevate your conversations and transform your pipeline with Pipeline Generation AI today.
You mentioned breath work and you mentioned to breathe. I know that there's obviously certain things that you need to do, from breathing. But what is that breath work that you talk about? What is the theory, and what is the theory, but what is the application? What is it that somebody needs to do in order to make that breath work?
Yeah, so we teach our guys simply like in through your nose, down into your belly, and then out through your mouth. And when I say down into your belly, a lot of times if you say like, hey, take a couple deep breaths, let's just do it. Guys, take a couple deep breaths. Let's see. Okay, so if you're not watching this and you're just listening to this, you look at both of them and like our chest kind of comes out, our shoulders come up a little bit. So that's not actually proper breathing in this context. So when we say down into our belly, what should actually happen if you put one hand on your chest and one hand on your belly, your chest hand shouldn't move at all, but your belly hand should actually come out. And so when we breathe in that way, and it's a really different rhythm than we're used to breathing, but when we breathe into our belly, what's actually happening is your lungs are fully expanding, and that diaphragm, it's called diaphragmatic breathing, that diaphragm pulls your lungs down and allows them to fully fill with oxygen. And oxygen is then what goes into our muscles to release muscle tension, like I mentioned, helps the brain think more clearly. If we just breathe through our chest, we have a rib cage there that actually inhibits the fullness of which your lungs can fill. And so we try to teach our guys that, and we teach our professionals that too. And what's really cool about it is it costs nothing. Like you don't need any devices to help you, and nobody needs to know that you're doing it, right? So like if you're walking into a meeting or you're in a conversation, you can, just take a couple deep breaths and exhale through your mouth. And it literally slows everything down, helps your vision, helps your cognitive processing, helps your heart rate, releases your body. And that's going to impact not only how you perform, but also how you're perceived in that moment. And so, selling is relationships. And so the energy that you bring as a salesperson to a moment has a huge impact on the ability to close or not. And so it's really fascinating too. They've done some studies that show the brain and the heart both give off electromagnetic energy, but the heart actually gives off 2 times more than the brain and can radiate off of you up to 10 feet. So
Wow.
in real talk, that means, we've all been around somebody where we leave them, and when we're done, we're like, whoa, I feel like I could scale a mountain, right? You're just kind of like energized, like that's their heart energy that you're vibing with. Or,
Right.
you sit down and you're going through something hard in life and you have a conversation with somebody and you leave them and you just have this sense of peace, like your problem's not solved, but you feel peaceful. Like that's their heart energy. Or, there's times you leave somebody and you're like, sweet Lord Jesus, I need a nap, right? Because they like suck the energy right out of you. That's their heart energy. And so when we're selling, when we're building relationship, when we're selling idea, like that energy that we bring to that interaction is really important. And that breath work is so subtle and it's so nuanced. And it's such a powerful tool to help you get into what we call in our mental performance playbook an optimal zone, that not only, again, does that impact your performance in that moment, but the receiver's perception and experience of you in that moment as well.
I want to talk a little bit more around setbacks, because you've got some really, really interesting kind of analogies about, how to view setbacks and to almost embrace setbacks as part of the journey. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we have one of a mentor in one of our buildings or one of our businesses, and he said, when I was young, I got handed this business unit out in Colorado to take over, and it was the poorest performing business unit in the company, and so I took it because I kind of had to. And then the president came out, and we were out skiing, and I was complaining about our customers, our supply chain, our employees, and all the stuff. And he said his president tapped him on the knee and he said, Tommy, you got to learn to love the business of business. And he was like, what in the hell does that mean? And so as I'm listening to him sort of digest and break down his perception of what loving the business of business is, it made me think of like a running back, right? In football, that if the quarterback hands the running back the ball and he runs and he gets tackled by the linebacker, he doesn't come back to the huddle and say, you guys, I was just trying to score a touchdown and these big mean guys tackled me. It's like, well, no shit, you're playing football, okay? Like, of course. And guess what? You run the next play and you might get beat up, you might get a touchdown, but guess what? After the game, you take an ice bath, you watch film, and then you go back to practice the next day because you love the game. Because that's what football is. And so I think when we extrapolate that to our own lives, right? Again, whether that's your marriage or raising kids or selling or building a business, like what game are you playing? Then you got to love it. And you have to expect to get tackled. You have to expect to have disagreement, to have failure. And it's not that you enjoy it, but you take an ice bath, you watch some film, and you come back the next day and you go again because you love it and it's worth it to you. And so I think, we can extend that mindset. And what's been interesting to me over the last probably 10 to 15 years that I've seen is that, we talk so much about excellence and high performance. And somewhere along the line, people started equating that with perfection. And so all of a sudden, if I'm not perfect, then I'm not a high performer and I'm not excellent. And that's not true at all, right? Like high performers and excellence, it assumes failure. But to me, it's about how quickly can we recover from that failure. And so, I've just saw this random thing on the internet, but like FAIL, it simply stands for first attempt in learning. And when you learn like fast and iterate, like that's what leads you to the win. And so we work a lot on helping people change their mindset, right? That protein pattern of what failure really is. It's information, and it's about how quickly can you recover from that through your own mental performance, through your organizational resources, through your network, and get back to the next play.
It's interesting that you're talking about failure, because actually some of the best sales leaders that we've kind of worked with, actually one of the things that they really try and coach into their teams is to create the space to allow their teams to fail right? And I think that's something that you're really talking about right there, where you're not trying to rescue everything. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think sometimes that can get overdone, but fundamentally I agree, right? I think sometimes when we talk about like success or failure, we're talking about like the outcome of success or failure. And what I try to help people focus on is your process, right? Because at any split millisecond, the brain can only be thinking about one thing. And so if it's thinking about the outcome, what is it not thinking about? The process, right? And so if we can get people to focus on the process and then equip them that regardless of what the outcome is, that they are equipped to handle that, that to me is what can fuel this like rapid cycle of failure and learning and iteration. You know, I talk a lot to my team in our business about like, we want to iterate towards excellence. Us getting something out there and then learning and iterating it and getting to the next version is way more successful for us than if we, you know, work on something for 3 months and try to get something perfect out the door as a product to our teams. And so, but again, to me, that is making sure that you're equipping people. Are worried about, why are we worried about success or failure? Because we don't believe that we can handle the fallout of failure. And whatever that fallout might be, with it, if it's with your customers, if it's with your investors, or if it's with yourself, right, and your identity that we talked about earlier. And so if we create an environment where we believe that we are so good physically, technically, tactically, and mentally, that regardless of what the outcome is, we're going to be able to then take the next step, whether it's the next win or the next iteration of a loss, then we're giving our time, energy, and attention to, I think, more productive things than, you know, just thinking about constructing a success or failure outcome.
I want to take this opportunity to ask you all very kindly to go and hit the subscribe button. Whether you're on YouTube, iTunes, or Spotify, it will mean the world to us if you could hit that subscribe button.
In terms of, you know, some of the things that are kind of in the makings for you personally, Dr. Amber, it'd be really good just to understand, you know, some of the projects that you're involved with, or, you know, have you got anything kind of in the works? I know you're doing quite a few podcasts. Just tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so first and foremost, I have a beautiful 2-year-old little girl, Eliana Bell. And so she's the main project, right, on the list right now. And she is quite that. She has her little power statements. We don't do them every night, but we do them frequently, where, you know, she says, I am strong, I am smart, I am beautiful, I am kind, and I am loved. And then she's like, I am Eliana Bell. And so, and she says all the time now too, I'm a beast. So that's very cute. She like wipes out on the sidewalk and she pops up and she's like, I am beast. And I'm like, and it's like, Mommy, kiss my knee. So she's our main project right now. But, you know, I have a podcast called Building Championship Mindsets, and we're just releasing a season right now that is taking our foundational mental playbook and directing it directly to kids. So I had a lot of parents and coaches reach out and say, hey, like, I would love for you to say to my kid what I've been trying to say to them. So could you make a season or an episode that's like, you just talk to my kids? So that season is dropping soon, so you can check that out as well. And then I have another book outline made. The first one was winning the mental game, the playbook for building championship mindsets. The next one is going to be on just building high performing organizations, and how do we build, like I mentioned, that, you know, top down system that leads to high performance. So those are some of the fun things that I'm working on right now. And then obviously, like you mentioned, I'm with LSU football, and we're in our summer training season. Well, just finishing up spring ball and heading into summer training soon, and we'll have an exciting season ahead of us. We've got a great group of young men, a phenomenal group of coaches, and really looking forward to that. And then in the business, you know, I've got a team of about 25 people that are embedded through our organization as leadership development coaches, philanthropists. We have a couple chaplains, and just doing this work on a day-to-day basis with frontline manufacturing team members. Our vision at Lippert is to make business a force for good in the world, because the world now more than ever needs some help, if you will, and the government isn't going to do it for the better anytime soon. The healthcare system isn't going to, and the education system isn't going to. There are really good people in all of those systems doing really good things, but they're big and they're hard to move. And so we believe that businesses are really uniquely positioned to be a force for good in the world if leaders understand the responsibility and opportunity they have to care for their people and send them home happier and healthier. Because when they do, they're better parents, they're better spouses, they're better community members because of it. So, we're working on things like building core values, writing personal mission statements, improving communication skills with, again, frontline manufacturing team members and leaders throughout our organization. So just continuing to work through that and build sustainable systems inside of our own organization to be able to do the things that we're talking about here today.
You mentioned leaders there, and I think a lot of this, we've had a lot of first, second, whatever, type of leaders listening to our show. Is there any simple takeaways or things that you can suggest to them that they start thinking about around some of these subjects that they can start implementing within their team to try and increase some of these performance capabilities?
Yeah, for at Lippert, we have a really simple leadership development model that, and we start by saying, John Maxwell says that leadership is influence, right? Nothing more, nothing less. And I'm a little bit of a nerd, so I like definitions. And it's interesting when you look at the definition of influence, it means to have an effect on the character or the behavior of someone or something. And so when we think about, okay, well, everybody has influence because you can have an effect on the character development. So I think first and foremost, what is your mindset as a leader? Is it to just get the work done? Because if so, you're going to have a very limited ceiling for your output there. And so what we try to coach our leaders on understanding their role of influence is to influence really three sectors. Themselves first and foremost, right? You have to lead in before you lead out. Then your team, and then your business. And when you put all three of those together, then you can start to really gain traction in your own life, in your team's life, and in your business. And so, back to what we talked about before of identity, who are you? Who is your team? Who is your business, right? You can clarify those things. What are your personal core values? What are the core values that your team is going to operate? What are the core values of your business practices, right? And then, even self-talk. Okay, what are the words that I'm saying to myself as a leader? 2, when I hear my team talking to me, you can pick up on people's self-talk just based on how they communicate about themselves, about their work, and then coach their self-talk. But more importantly, understand that you as a leader, a lot of people get their self-talk from communication from other people. And our leaders' voices carry more weight than other people's. And so as leaders and as parents, as coaches, our words are so important because they become other people's self-talk. And so just, again, shifting your mindset on how do I communicate to my team and working on your communication. And then finally, from a business, that business standpoint is what's the communication of that to your customers or to your clients. I remember, when we started doing some just team identity work in our business for like our supply chain or for our sales team, some of our executives came back and they're like, dude, I just had the best meeting with one of our suppliers and we talked about like the product the last 15 minutes, but the whole first part was about our identity of like who we are as a team, who they are as a business, the match that actually we had and we didn't even realize that. So the product signatures on the back end became so much easier and faster because they identified, organizational alignment on the front end. So it's a different way of thinking. It's a different way of running your business, and it requires some courage to do that because it's not how most businesses or leaders are going to step into their very serious and very important role, right? As a coach or as a leader. But again, we know it leads to performance.
I just want to point out that behind you, you've got a sign there that says "Think like a champion today." And I suppose, in terms of that, Now, how important is that to start now if you want to be a champion? Just tell us a little bit about what that means and why that's important right now.
Yeah, I mean, because again, humans have 70 to 80,000 thoughts a day, and every one of those thoughts is either helping us or hurting us. And so I remember my freshman year, we had all of our preseason meetings, and we were signing all of our papers. And the last paper our coach handed out was the no drinking policy. And so we had no drinking in season because we were, the year before that, we had won the national championship. We were en route to win the national championship again. And so right as everybody was, we're like, okay, well, yeah, we can get it. No drinking in season. That makes sense. And then our coach goes, and ladies, just so there's no mistake, we are in season all year. Because if you want to be a national champion, you have to act like a national champion every single day in everything that you do. And we were all like, right, yes, okay, you are correct. But and that might seem silly, but that is so true. Like if we want a healthy life, if we want to actually enjoy the work that we do every day, if we want to have healthy relationships, we have to do this stuff today, right? Not like you have to be the person that you want to be tomorrow, today, in order for that to happen. And so it's just a good reminder that it's not tomorrow and it's not yesterday, it's today. And if you messed yesterday up, well, good news, today is today. And but don't wait for tomorrow either, because we don't know we get that chance.
Yeah, there was one question, because obviously, I hear it in social media, at present, the word manifesting is just kind of one of these things and one of these terminologies that's used quite regularly. Is, what we've discussed today, the principles of manifesting and positivity and really kind of like saying to yourself on a daily basis, I manifest, certain things in my life. Is it same principles?
Yeah, I think they're connected. I think that there's elements that you can combine all of those, right? You can't just think about something. You have to get up and do the work every day. And I'm not saying we're always happy about it, but you can certainly manifest the negative too. And then I do believe in that, because as a person thinks in their heart, so they are. And that becomes, who you are as an individual. And that has nothing to do with our external things, right? And resources that we have. Some of the happiest countries in the world are individuals that live in third world countries, because they see the world differently and they're grateful for things. And so, we see that gratitude has a huge effect on brain functioning. And the reason that it does, they found that if you keep a gratitude journal for 30 days, it can have a lasting impact of your general happiness for up to 3 months. And why is that? Because it trains the brain to look for the good in the day. And so, manifesting of getting in your mind what you want and how you want that, I think that's really powerful. If you don't couple that with the character work that it takes to sustain the manifestation of that, or do the work that it takes to be at whatever level it is that you want to do your work, then you can think all you want and you can maybe even manifest it, but you can't sustain it. And that, to me, is an important element when we're talking through things like that.
Dr. Amber, I think it's been a fascinating session. We're so grateful to have you on the show, just to kind of just reflect on some of the kind of key takeaways that I personally took from this session. I think obviously, a lot of people talk about, positive mindset, but being intentional about your, who you are and how you show up, and really understanding what high performance is. It's not just about winning, it's about how you show up, and really being able to be much more intentional and purposeful, and be able to control the thinking versus the talk. And there's been so many takeaways today. I'm sure our audience have been, really, really fascinated. If they wanted to kind of reach out to you or find you online, where could people find you and reach out to you?
Yeah, for sure. One thing I just want to highlight there too is when you say positive thinking, some people have a very negative aversion to that for whatever reason. So I just want to say too, if you're that person and positive thinking isn't your vibe, replace the word positive with productive, right? There's productive thinking and there's unproductive thinking. Now, we do know that the brain in a positive state thinks more clearly, thinks more creatively, and it problem solves better. So we need a positive mindset state, particularly when things are not going well. So keep that in mind. One of the things that we do in our business is we start every meeting with wins, or core value moments or leadership moments, to just get our minds right about what we're about to dive into, even if it's a difficult meeting. But again, it's not just positive thinking, it's productive thinking, because the brain is doing something with every thought you have. Is it helping you or is it hurting you? And so with that, if you would like to learn more, you can follow me on X at Champ Mindsets, on Instagram as well, on Facebook and LinkedIn at Selking Performance Group. And then my website is selkingperformance.com, and you can find the podcast there, my book, our performance team, if you're interested in some one-on-one coaching, or even a keynote address for your organization. And then my email is drselking at selkingperformance.com. So super accessible, and looking forward to seeing, how this resonated with people and some of the things they might be able to apply because of it.
Amazing. Yeah, and we'll ensure that we've put all those links in the descriptions on any of the content that we share. So, very much appreciated. It's been an absolute pleasure. As I said, the biggest takeaway was the difference between the listening and the actual speaking, right? And I think I do a lot of that. I listen to my thoughts a lot, but don't necessarily talk to myself in that way. So I think that's definitely something that's going to sit there. And definitely the breath work. My wife tells me all the time, before you react to anything the kids say, just take one breath, even if it's one breath, because instantly you may you may act in a very different way, which is probably less out of emotion from the reaction, rather than thinking, actually giving yourself time to think.
Yeah. And, on that too, like turn it into a game too, is like, how can you get them to think differently about that moment? I mentioned earlier that one of the things is, filling out your network and having mentors, and really the beauty of mentors is they can help you think right about situations. Like, and now in my life today, if I find myself getting stressed or anxious or mad about something, I've got a list of people that, depending on the situation and what it is, I'll pick up the phone and I'm like, hey, I need you to help me think right about X, Y, and Z. And then they give me their perspective and lens, and 9.5 times out of 10, I'm like, oh, you're right. I went down a path that was like totally not on point there, when I could have spent time being upset about it, being inefficient with my time, trying to problem solve for something that wasn't even a problem, or I was solving the wrong problem, right? And so the same is true when we're thinking about coaching our kids or our team as leaders. Is our job is to help our people think right about a situation, about choices, about decisions, about, all of the stuff. And then we have to think right about the moment too, right? Like, Is it really that big of a deal? And if it is, it's a big deal, then make it a big deal, but if not, how do we get to, thinking right faster? And when we do that, it increases just our ability to, again, be who we want to be and get what we want in that moment.
Yeah, it's so funny. And again, this is something I wanted to actually, you just reminded me of something I wanted to bring into this conversation earlier, is that, the art of the playbook that, a lot of our listeners have learned, which is, the moving more into a scientific, repeatable process in sales. Lots of people that aren't from this community, that have been good in sales come into this playbook and they realize, okay, these are the reasons why I'm good at sales. And so they become unconsciously competent, and now they've become competent at what they're doing. I think lots of what you have shared with us today, I'm sure a lot of it is going to resonate with many of the leaders, because they know they do these things, but they don't know why. They don't know the scientific proof of why it is that leads to a positive outcome. And I think you've really kind of given our audience definitely, okay, this is now, I'm more intrigued, I'm more engaged, I want to know more about this whole subject, because I think you're now helping bring the science to this unconsciously competent thing that you're doing.
That's such a good point, right? Because then, like, when it goes well, you're like, well, that's why it went well. And when it doesn't go well, you don't have to be like, oh God, am I losing my edge? Analyze the situation. What went well? What do you need to do better? What did you learn? And then go back to, oh, this principle works, reapply it here. And it gives you more courage and confidence to execute on those things. So it's a great point.
Amazing. So look, to all our listeners, thank you so much for joining in and listening in. If you like what you've heard, please do subscribe to our various channels on iTunes, Spotify and YouTube. All the links will be in the description below, and we look forward to welcoming you back for another session very soon. Thank you and goodbye.